at I'm Quitting Alcohol with comedian David Boyle. Yeah. I got dragged to fucking brunch today. Brunch. I don't know if you know me, but I'm not a fucking bruncher. I'm not into brunch at all. I'm generally not even that into speaking to people, let alone sober in a shit cafe over avocados. That is below zero on my fucking interest-o-meter. But sometimes in life you've got to do things that you don't want to do. You've got to do them for other people. It's one of the worst things about life, doing things for other people. Don't let people fool you into thinking doing things for other people is rewarding and fulfilling. It's not. It's a fucking lie. So I got dragged to brunch. They're all my wife's friends, obviously. No one I know has ever been to brunch. I especially hate just the saying, let's do brunch. We're doing brunch. We're doing brunch. We're not doing anything because I'm going to fucking walk in front of a tram before I get there. Anyway, so we're at brunch and I'm forced to speak to people, obviously. I spend about 50% of the time staring into the distance and the other 50% of the time really straining some conversation out. Really pushing some fucking conversation out. One of my wife's Indian friends is engaged to a whitey, so I got stuck speaking to her. She's alright, whatever, who gives a shit. She's never going to listen to this anyway, thank fuck. Actually, thank fuck, she's never going to listen to this. I did an episode of this, it was day 113, and I talked about death by tree making a comeback, and I talked about the fucking lady that was jogging through the park and a 106-year-old elm tree fell on her head and she died just as she was walking past. So I'm speaking to this whitey at brunch and she's telling me about how she just failed her doctorate. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, you failed it. She's like, yeah, but there's a bit more to the story. A lot went down during my PhD, so they're going to give me another opportunity. I'm like, oh yeah, what went down? She's like, 6 months into my PhD, my supervisor died. I'm like, oh fuck, that's brutal. To be honest with you, I was sort of feigning sympathy. Really didn't give a fuck. And she goes, so they gave me a new supervisor and a new research question for my PhD, and I only had 2 months to do it, so I ended up failing. But because my supervisor died, and then she's like choking up a little bit. She's like, because my supervisor died, everyone was in shock. It was a very emotional time. The other supervisors were just in so much shock. Everyone was in a daze for weeks and months. I'm like, oh God. She's like, do you remember not long ago a tree fell on a lady and she died? It was her. I'm like, well, I actually do. I covered that in a podcast, day 113. It was quite funny. I pretended the tree had consciousness and deliberately fell on the lady. Like, knew it was going out and like, fuck this, I'm taking some cunts out. I'll link you. I wanted to send her a link to day 113. Just go, don't worry, I had it covered. And she actually told me the full details of it, which I got completely wrong on day 113. I thought it was just some jogger jogging through the park, but it wasn't that. From what I recall, she was dropping her kids. She had 3 kids, which makes it pretty sad, to be honest with you. But, like, people have to do podcasts. But she was walking from the car to... This is only like 4 hours ago. I completely forget. And I made a point of remembering so I could say it on the fucking podcast. Anyway, she was at the car. She dropped her kids off. And she had to walk through the park to work or something. Let's say it's that. And it's a fuck all walk. And on the walk across, she had headphones in. And she was on the phone to her mum. And as she was walking across, the tree crushed her. And her mum actually heard the whole fucking thing, which is pretty brutal. Which is fucking brutal. But people have to do podcasts. You got to remember, people have to do podcasts. If this ever gets back to her, she's going to hate me more than she already does. Because the first time I met her, we were at another shitty lunch. And in the middle of lunch, I just start talking about this rapist at the table. This comedian rapist that we all knew. Is this brunch conversation? I'm like, I don't know what fucking brunch conversation is. Fuck you. People have to do podcasts. That's all I know. They have to do them. I can't believe how much I went out of my way to try and remember every detail of that story that she told me about 3.5 hours ago, because I knew I was going to talk about it on the podcast as she was telling me in tears. And as she's crying, I'm like, this is good pod material. I'm like, remember every detail. And I have not remembered fucking any detail. I find that very concerning, that my mind can't even hold a 3-minute conversation for 3 hours. It's concerning. Anyway, thanks to the people who've been adding me on Instagram lately. My fucking Instagram is going off. It's up to almost 260 people. It is ticking over like crazy. And thanks to the people who've been sending me messages, it seems to be mainly alcoholics messaging me while they're drunk. And I don't mind. I like it. Keep doing it. Keep adding me. I'm Boyle Comedy. And if you like the podcast, rate it 5 stars. Give it a positive review. And subscribe. And tell your friends about it. Mainly tell your friends about it. Alright. See you later.